The hum was barely a whisper, a low, guttural thrum that vibrated through the very bones of the old, forgotten hangar. Dust motes danced in the solitary, stark beam of a work light, illuminating a scene that defied logic and invited ridicule. Within this cavernous space, a lone figure moved with the quiet grace of a surgeon, his weathered hands, etched with grease and experience, navigating the complex arteries of an engine unlike any other. It was a helicopter turbine, stripped bare, its powerful core exposed, but subtly reshaped, re-engineered for a dream so outlandish it bordered on obsession. Elias Vance. His name meant nothing to the titans of the aviation world, but here, in the cold heart of his sanctuary, he was a god to his machine. The air around him throbbed with the suppressed power of his creation, a mechanical heart waiting to roar, a beast of intricate metal and coiled energy yearning for release. Every rivet, every gleaming pipe, every meticulously tightened bolt was a testament to countless hours, to a singular, unyielding vision. But even in the silence of his workshop, the echoes of doubt were deafening. Whispers, sharp as shrapnel, pierced the solitude. Laughter, hollow and dismissive, seemed to reverberate from the unseen world beyond the hangar walls. A helicopter engine, they scoffed, their voices dripping with condescension. At 30,000 feet, the man's a fool. He's chasing ghosts. They mocked his ambition, his unconventional choice, dismissing his rotor-powered folly as nothing more than a fool's errand, a one-way ticket to failure and financial ruin. The established order, the sleek, corporate-backed giants of the sky, saw him as an anomaly, a madman daring to challenge their dominion with an engine designed for vertical lift, not the thin, unforgiving air of the stratosphere. Yet, in Elias Vance's eyes, there was no flicker of uncertainty, no hint of surrender. Only an unyielding resolve, a quiet defiance against the world's established wisdom. His gaze, sharp and intense, swept over the gleaming components, each one a silent promise. They could laugh, they could mock, but they hadn't felt the raw power contained within this unconventional beast. They hadn't seen the meticulous calculations, the late nights fueled by cheap coffee and an impossible dream. They hadn't understood that this wasn't just an engine. It was a declaration, a challenge hurled at the very concept of what was possible. The core problem, the impossible mountain Elias had chosen to climb, was stark and unforgiving. He had to prove that this unorthodox machine, a powerhouse explicitly designed for the brutal demands of vertical ascent, could not only contend, but utterly dominate at altitudes where only purpose-built jets were meant to thrive. Specifically at 30,000 feet above the Earth, a realm of biting cold, crushing atmosphere pressure, and air so thin it choked conventional engines. This wasn't a mere test flight. It was a gauntlet thrown down, a David versus Goliath battle where David's slingshot was a re-engineered helicopter turbine, and Goliath was the sleek, undisputed king of the skies. The modern jet, a symbol of corporate might and technological supremacy. For years, Elias had been a phantom in the aviation world, a whisper in the wind. His work was a solitary vigil, a pilgrimage through the labyrinthine mechanics of thrust and drag, lift and weight. He'd spent decades dismantling, studying, and reassembling, his mind a relentless engine of innovation. He'd seen the limitations of conventional designs, the complacency of those who believed the pinnacle of flight had already been reached, and he'd envisioned something different, something radical, something that would make them all eat their words. The very idea of a helicopter engine, with its inherent design for high torque and lower speeds, challenging a jet at cruising altitude was considered ludicrous. Jets thrived on speed, on ramming thin air into their compressors, on the sheer brute force of their exhaust. A helicopter turbine, on the other hand, excelled at generating immense lift and maneuverability closer to the ground, its power band optimized for different demands entirely. To adapt it for sustained, high-altitude, horizontal flight meant tearing up the rulebook, rewriting the laws of physics as they applied to this specific machine. It meant facing engineering nightmares that would send lesser men running for cover. Elias, however, wasn't a lesser man. He was a man possessed, driven by a fire that burned hotter than any jet exhaust. He saw the potential where others saw only absurdity. He knew that the raw power of a helicopter turbine, if unleashed and controlled correctly, could be a secret weapon. The question wasn't if it could fly at 30,000 feet, but how it could not just survive, but thrive there, turning the tables on the arrogant, high-flying jets. He was betting everything, his reputation, his life savings, his sanity, on a belief that pure, unadulterated ingenuity could humble even the most advanced, purpose-built aircraft. The stage was set, the challenge issued, and the sky, cold and indifferent, waited for the spectacle to begin. The sky might have waited, but Elias Vance could not. His was a race against the clock, against dwindling funds, and against the very laws of aerodynamics as understood by everyone else. The challenge wasn't just to build an engine. It was to sculpt a new reality. The initial days, weeks, months dissolved into a grueling blur of sleepless nights and the acrid smell of burnt metal. He pushed himself to the brink, his body a mere vessel for his relentless mind. Every shattered component, every catastrophic test failure was a fresh wound, but also a brutal, indispensable lesson. The turbine, his mechanical beast, was temperamental. It roared with defiance, spitting fire and fragments in its early iterations, refusing to bend to his will. It was a dance of frustration and fleeting triumph, a dialogue between man and machine where the engine spoke in screams and sudden silences. He remembered one night. The hangar plunged into darkness save for the glow of a single halogen lamp, its light stark against the intricate guts of the turbine. A critical component, a custom-machined compressor blade, had failed spectacularly during a bench test, sending shrapnel whistling past his head. He stood there, heart hammering, not in fear, but in a cold, calculating rage. He didn't just replace the blade. He redesigned the entire compressor stage. He spent weeks poring over fluid dynamics equations, sketching blueprints on grease-stained napkins, and then, with painstaking precision, machining new parts from exotic alloys. He sold his vintage pickup truck, a piece of his own history, to fund the next batch of materials. His old man's watch, a treasured keepsake, went next. Each sacrifice was a deeper commitment, a severing of ties to the past for the sake of an uncertain future. The conventional wisdom dictated that a helicopter engine, designed for maximum torque at lower altitudes, would simply starve in the thin air at 30,000 feet. Its compressor, built to gulp dense air for vertical lift, would gasp and choke. Elias saw this not as a limitation, but as a puzzle. He envisioned a variable geometry intake system, a mechanical lung that could adapt its breathing to the shifting densities of the atmosphere. It was like teaching a deep-sea fish to survive on Mount Everest. He spent months perfecting the intricate actuators and sensors, ensuring the system could dynamically adjust, forcing enough air into the hungry maw of the compressor, even when the air itself was a phantom. This wasn't merely tweaking. It was fundamentally re-engineering the engine's respiratory system. Then came the turbine section itself. Traditionally, it was optimized for power delivery to the rotor mast. Elias needed it to generate sustained, forward thrust with unprecedented efficiency. He redesigned the turbine blades, reshaping their aerofoils with microtolerances, coaxing every ounce of energy from the expanding gases. He experimented with a new exhaust nozzle, a complex, conical design that could vector thrust more effectively at high speeds and altitudes, turning the engine's breath into a focused, relentless push. It was a delicate ballet of thermodynamics and metallurgy, a constant battle against heat, pressure, and the relentless forces of physics. He worked with a precision that bordered on obsession, his hands moving with an almost unconscious expertise, each weld, each polish, a testament to his singular vision. Word of Elias Vance's madness began to spread beyond the dusty confines of his hangar. Initially, it was just gossip among local pilots, an amusing anecdote about a reclusive mechanic. But then, as his modified engine began to show promising, albeit erratic, results on ground tests, the whispers grew louder, tinged with a new, uncomfortable curiosity. The aviation establishment, the very corporate giants he sought to challenge, caught wind of it. They saw not innovation, but an affront. A maverick operating outside their carefully constructed world of certifications and multi-million-dollar R&D budgets, dared to suggest their designs weren't the absolute pinnacle. A prominent aerospace conglomerate, AeroCorp, a name synonymous with sleek, efficient, and utterly conventional jetliners, took particular offense. They initially dismissed Elias with a patronizing press release, calling his endeavors a charming, if misguided, exercise in futility. But the public, drawn to the underdog narrative, started paying attention. Online forums buzzed with speculation. News outlets, sensing a compelling story, began to send reporters to the edge of his airfield, eager for a glimpse of the helicopter jet. The ridicule hardened into open scorn, then into a direct public challenge. AeroCorp, confident in their technological superiority and eager to squash the burgeoning public interest in Elias's project, issued a formal invitation. Not just an invitation, but a direct dare. They would pit their latest state-of-the-art business jet, the AeroCorp Stinger, against Elias's creation. The venue, 30,000 feet. The objective, a series of maneuvers and speed runs to definitively prove the Stinger's undisputed dominance. It was a public spectacle designed to humiliate Elias and reaffirm AeroCorp's position as the unchallenged titan of the skies. For Elias, this wasn't just a challenge. It was an indictment, a trial by fire where his entire life's work hung in the balance. The Stinger, with its polished fuselage and cutting-edge avionics, became the embodiment of corporate power, conventional success, and the established order, everything Elias was fighting against. The pressure intensified, pressing down on Elias like the very atmosphere he sought to conquer. Every hour became precious, every decision critical. He fine-tuned the engine's electronic control unit, writing lines of code that would optimize fuel flow and turbine speed for the punishing conditions of high altitude. He meticulously balanced the compressor and turbine shafts, ensuring there wasn't a whisper of vibration that could tear the machine apart mid-flight. The airframe itself, a robust but unassuming experimental craft he'd acquired years ago, underwent its final modifications. Wing extensions for better lift in thin air, reinforced stress points, and a stripped-down cockpit, devoid of luxury, packed only with the essential instruments Elias needed to become one with his machine. His test runs became more frequent, pushing the engine closer to its operational limits. The hangar doors would roll open just before dawn, revealing the small, odd-looking plane to the crisp morning air. The engine, no longer temperamental, now sang a powerful, focused song. Its roar echoed across the empty fields, a sound that was less a helicopter's thrum and more a jet snarl, but with an underlying, unique cadence. Each climb, each simulated high-altitude run, was a nerve-wracking gamble. He felt every tremor, every subtle shift in performance through the soles of his feet and the tips of his fingers. He felt every tremor, every subtle shift in performance through the soles of his feet and the tips of his fingers. The final night before the confrontation was a silent one. Elias didn't work. He simply stood in the hangar, the great metal doors shut against the world, and listened. He listened to the cooling clicks of the engine, the slow settling of the airframe. He laid a hand on the cold aluminum skin of his creation, a silent pact passing between man and machine. There were no more calculations to be made, no more parts to be tuned. All that was left was the sky and the truth it held. They were ready. The morning of the challenge dawned cold and mercilessly clear. The airfield was a spectacle. On one side, the AeroCorp Stinger gleamed under the rising sun, a monument to corporate polish and aerospace perfection. Its support crew, dressed in matching uniforms, moved with crisp, practiced efficiency. Media vans and broadcast satellites lined the perimeter, their lenses trained on the impending drama. On the other side of the tarmac, looking small and almost comically out of place, was Elias's craft. No uniformed crew, just Elias himself, performing his final walk-around in a worn flight suit. He ignored the cameras, the condescending glances from the AeroCorp team, the hushed whispers of the reporters. His world had shrunk to the space between him and his machine. The climb to 30,000 feet was a study in contrasts. The Stinger sliced through the atmosphere with arrogant ease, its twin engines leaving clean, white contrails against the deepening blue. It was a predator in its natural habitat. Elias's ascent was different. It was a brawl. His engine, the Vindicator's heart, screamed a defiant, guttural roar that was utterly alien to these altitudes. It was the sound of raw, unrefined power clawing its way upward, fighting for every foot of altitude. The aircraft shuddered, not with weakness, but with contained energy, a bull straining against a leash. From the cockpit of the Stinger, the two AeroCorp pilots watched Elias's slow, brutal climb on their monitors, a smirk share between them. The Challenger looked like it was tearing itself apart just to reach the arena. At 30,000 feet, the world transformed into a vast, unforgiving expanse of blinding sun and profound emptiness. The air was a razor, thin and lethally cold. Below, the earth was a distant, abstract curve. Here, the rules were different. The Stinger floated, poised and perfect, its systems humming in the thin atmosphere. Elias leveled off, his own breathing a little ragged, not from exertion, but from the sheer, overwhelming reality of the moment. He could feel the engine behind him, a living presence, its vibrations traveling up the spine of the aircraft and into his own. It was breathing steadily now, that ingenious intake system he'd bled for, adjusting, compensating, forcing the starved air into its core. The voice of the AeroCorp lead pilot crackled over the radio, smooth and laced with professional condescension. "Vindicator, are you stable at altitude? We'll begin with a simple straight-line acceleration test. Objective is to reach Mach 0.85. Try to keep up." Elias keyed his mic, his voice calm and steady. "Vindicator is stable. Ready when you are, Stinger." The two aircraft lined up, a mile apart, two specks of metal in an infinite sky. On the signal, the Stinger's engines surged, and it shot forward like a silver bullet, effortlessly accelerating. It was a display of pure, unadulterated speed, a demonstration of why jets own the sky. Elias pushed his own throttle forward. The response was not the explosive kick of a jet, but a deep, world-shaking surge of power. The Vindicator lunged forward, the unique roar of its turbine deepening into a savage howl. It gained speed, faster than any helicopter engine craft had a right to, but the gap between it and the Stinger widened relentlessly. From the ground, the observers saw exactly what they expected: the sleek corporate jet leaving the homemade oddity in its dust. The AeroCorp CEO, watching from a luxury mobile command center, allowed himself a satisfied smile. The humiliation was proceeding on schedule, but Elias wasn't watching the Stinger. He was watching his instruments. Airspeed, turbine temperature, fuel flow. Everything was exactly where he predicted it would be. He wasn't trying to beat the Stinger in a drag race. That was their game, played by their rules. His moment would come. The next test was a sustained, high G turn, a 360-degree arc at a constant altitude, designed to test an airframe's integrity and an engine's ability to provide consistent thrust under extreme stress. The Stinger went first, carving a perfect, beautiful circle in the sky, its advanced flight controls and powerful engines making it look as easy as a stroll in the park. It was a textbook maneuver, executed with flawless precision. Then it was Elias's turn. The AeroCorp pilot's voice returned, a touch of boredom in his tone. "All right, Vindicator, your show. Try not to fall out of the sky." Elias didn't respond. He banked the aircraft hard, pulling back on the stick. The G-forces slammed into him, pressing him deep into his seat, trying to crush the air from his lungs. The airframe groaned, a sound of tortured metal he knew intimately. But it was the engine that changed the game. As the turn tightened and the wings bit into the thin air, demanding more and more power to fight the crushing drag, the helicopter turbine came alive. Its core design, built for lifting immense weight, for delivering pure, ungodly torque, translated into a relentless, unyielding push. Where a jet engine might struggle for air in the tight turn, Elias's variable intake lunged open, gulping down the slivers of atmosphere, feeding the beast. The roar deepened, the vibration intensified, and the Vindicator didn't just hold the turn. It clawed its way through it, its nose locked onto its trajectory with a tenacity that defied physics. On the ground, the telemetry screens told a story no one was prepared for. The Vindicator's turn radius was impossibly tight. Its speed barely dropped. The engine wasn't just surviving the maneuver, it was thriving on it. The sneers in the AeroCorp command center faded, replaced by a stunned, uneasy silence. In the cockpit of the Stinger, the pilots exchanged a look of disbelief. That wasn't supposed to happen. That simply wasn't possible. The mechanic's folly was starting to fight back, and it was fighting dirty. That wasn't supposed to happen. That simply wasn't possible. The mechanic's folly was starting to fight back, and it was fighting dirty. In the cockpit of the Stinger, Captain Miller, a man whose career had been built on precision and the unwavering superiority of corporate engineering, stared at his instruments. The Vindicator's telemetry, relayed to his display, showed a turn radius that defied the laws of physics for an aircraft of its apparent design. "Did you see that, Dave?" he muttered, his voice tight. Co-pilot Peterson, equally bewildered, shook his head. "I'm running the numbers again, sir. It can't be right." Its airspeed barely dipped. On the ground, in the polished mobile command center, the AeroCorp CEO's satisfied smile had curdled into a thin, grim line. The confident chatter of his engineers had died, replaced by a nervous murmur. This wasn't just an anomaly, it was an insult. Over the radio, the lead pilot's voice, now devoid of its earlier condescension, crackled with a forced calm. "Vindicator, impressive maneuver. Let's proceed to the next phase, a high-altitude climb rate assessment. We'll start a vertical ascent at maximum thrust. See if you can match us." It was a desperate attempt to regain control, to push the Vindicator into a realm where the raw, unadulterated power of a purpose-built jet engine should, by all rights, leave the helicopter turbine choking in its exhaust. They wanted to expose its limits, to watch it falter and fall. Elias, however, anticipated this. He knew the Stinger's strengths lay in sustained horizontal speed and efficient cruising. But he also knew the Vindicator's secret weapon, the very DNA of its helicopter core. Those turbines were designed to fight gravity, to lift tons of metal and cargo straight off the ground. He keyed his mic, his voice betraying no hint of the adrenaline coursing through him. Understood, Stinger. Vindicator ready for ascent. The Stinger roared, its twin engines igniting with a surge that pressed Miller and Peterson back into their seats. The sleek jet pointed its nose skyward, a silver arrow aimed at the heavens, and began a breathtakingly steep climb. Its rate of ascent was phenomenal, a testament to decades of aerospace innovation, devouring thousands of feet per minute. It was a spectacle of power, majestic and terrifying. Then, it was Elias's turn. He slammed the throttle forward. The Vindicator didn't just roar, it bellowed. It was a sound that shook the very air around the small craft, a deep, guttural cry of pure, unbridled torque. The modified helicopter turbine, designed to rip itself free from the earth, now sought to rip itself free from the sky. The nose of the Vindicator pitched up, not as gracefully as the Stinger, but with a raw, almost violent eagerness. The G-forces pressed Elias into his seat with an intensity that blurred his vision for a fleeting second. He felt the machine shudder, a controlled, violent tremor that was the very signature of its immense power. The variable intake system, his mechanical lung, gulped down the thin, frigid air, forcing it into the hungry beast, turning what should have been a suffocating environment into a feast of oxygen for its ravenous core. From the Stinger, Captain Miller watched his radar screen in stunned silence. The Vindicator, initially lagging, was not only maintaining its climb rate, but was beginning to close the gap. It was climbing with a ferocity that defied belief, its airspeed holding steady as it clawed its way higher. The helicopter engine, which should have been gasping for breath, was screaming with a power that seemed to increase with altitude, as if it thrived on the very challenge of the thin air. The Stinger's pilots exchanged another glance, this one laced with genuine alarm. This wasn't a fluke. This was a direct, impossible challenge to their dominance. He's gaining on us, Peterson stammered, his voice cracking slightly. His vertical speed is insane. On the ground, the AeroCorp CEO slammed a fist on the table. What in God's name is that thing doing? He demanded, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. The telemetry confirmed the impossible. The Vindicator's climb rate was not just matching, but slowly, inexorably surpassing the Stinger's. The numbers on the screen flashed red, indicating an unprecedented performance from the underdog. Elias was one with his machine. He felt the engine's every vibration, every surge of power, as if it were an extension of his own will. The Vindicator was a living entity, its heart beating a furious rhythm, its metal skin groaning under the strain, yet holding firm. He wasn't just flying. He was wrestling with the very fabric of the atmosphere, bending it to his will. The turbine's whine became a primal scream, a triumphant declaration echoing across the vast emptiness of 30,000 feet. Then came the moment of ultimate humiliation. The Stinger, pushing its engines to their absolute limit, began to show the strain. Its climb rate, while still impressive, started to plateau slightly, a consequence of the extreme conditions and its design optimized for efficiency, not this brutal, sustained vertical sprint. But the Vindicator, fueled by Elias's relentless belief in the raw, unadulterated power of its re-engineered helicopter core, found another gear. With a final, earth-shattering surge, it pulled ahead, its silhouette briefly eclipsing the Stinger against the blinding sun. For a split second, the Vindicator was higher. It was faster, vertically, than the undisputed king of the skies. The Stinger's pilots watched in disbelief as the smaller craft, with its unconventional engine, soared above them, a defiant beacon against the endless blue. Captain Miller could only stare, his jaw slack. He had never, in his entire distinguished career, witnessed anything like it. The silence in the Stinger's cockpit was deafening, broken only by the frantic beeps of their own struggling systems. The Vindicator had not just matched them. It had humiliated them in their own domain, at their own game. Elias didn't gloat. He didn't even acknowledge the Stinger below him. His focus was entirely on his machine, on the roaring beast that had just achieved the impossible. He felt a profound sense of communion with the Vindicator, a silent understanding passing between them. They had done it. They had flown higher, faster, and more aggressively than anyone had believed possible for a helicopter engine. The world, for a brief, stunning moment, had been turned on its head. The world, for a brief, stunning moment, had been turned on its head. In the cockpit of the Stinger, the silence was a physical weight, heavier than any G-force. Captain Miller, a man of unflappable composure, found himself staring at the empty sky above, where moments ago Elias's unconventional craft had been. His co-pilot, Peterson, was equally speechless, his hands still hovering over a control, as if expecting to magically rewind time and undo what they had just witnessed. They had been outclimbed, not just by a hair, not by a technicality, but decisively, undeniably, by an engine they had dismissed as a parlor trick. The Stinger's systems, still struggling from the brutal vertical sprint, chirped a series of minor warnings, a symphony of electronic embarrassment. Miller finally found his voice, a strained whisper. Did that just happen? Below, in the AeroCorp Mobile Command Center, chaos erupted. The CEO, a man accustomed to flawless victories and unwavering market dominance, was a furious blur of motion. His face, once flushed with anticipation of Elias's defeat, was now a sickly white, streaked with veins of crimson. "Give me a report. What went wrong? What was that?" he bellowed, his voice echoing off the polished surfaces of the command center. His engineers, usually so confident and precise, stammered, their eyes darting between flashing telemetry screens that defied every principle they had been taught. The Vindicator's climb rate, its sustained power, its sheer audacity, were anomalies that shredded their meticulously crafted data models. It was like watching a donkey win the Kentucky Derby. The public, watching the live feeds, was a mix of gasps and incredulous cheers. The underdog, the lone mechanic, had just delivered a knockout blow to the undisputed champion. The internet was already ablaze. Memes of the helicopter jet, humiliating the corporate drone, spreading like wildfire across social media. Elias, however, remained oblivious to the burgeoning frenzy below. He eased the Vindicator out of its climb, the engine settling into a powerful, steady hum. The primal scream had softened into a contented purr, a satisfied beast after a hard-won battle. He felt no surge of triumph, no urge to celebrate with a fist pump or a shout. Instead, a profound sense of calm washed over him, a quiet vindication that settled deep in his bones. He looked out at the vast, endless blue, then down at the distant, almost insignificant speck that was the Stinger. It wasn't about beating them. It was about proving that the impossible wasn't impossible at all. It was about the truth of his machine, the culmination of decades of relentless, often solitary, work. The Vindicator had spoken its piece, and the sky had listened. The descent was slow, deliberate, a victory lap without the fanfare. Elias guided his craft with a gentle hand, savoring every moment, every subtle vibration of the airframe. The engine, his mechanical heart, responded with perfect obedience, a loyal companion that had journeyed with him to the very edge of what was believed possible. As he approached the airfield, the crowd below was no longer a blur of distant shapes. He could make out the throng of people, the media vans, the now silent AeroCorp contingent. He could almost feel their collective gaze, a mixture of awe, confusion, and grudging respect. The Stinger had already landed, its pilots probably still trying to reconcile their instruments with their shattered egos. The Vindicator touched down with a soft thud, a whisper of tires on asphalt. The engine's roar subsided, replaced by the cooling clicks and groans of metal contracting, a sigh of relief from a machine that had defied gravity and expectation. Elias cut the power, and a profound silence descended upon the airfield, a silence so complete it seemed to absorb all sound. No cheering, no applause, just a collective, stunned hush. The crowd, the reporters, even the AeroCorp team, stood frozen, their mouths agape, their minds struggling to process the visual evidence of what they had just witnessed. It was a silence born of disbelief, of the shattering of paradigms, of the sudden, undeniable proof that the world was far more complex and unpredictable than they had assumed. Elias opened the canopy, the rush of fresh air, a welcome sensation after the thin, frigid atmosphere of 30,000 feet. He climbed out slowly, his movements deliberate, his worn flight suit a stark contrast to the immaculate uniforms of the AeroCorp crew. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the cameras or the stunned faces. His eyes were fixed on the Vindicator, his creation. He ran a hand along its fuselage, feeling the faint warmth emanating from the powerful engine within. It was a moment of quiet communion, a silent understanding passing between man and machine. They had faced the impossible together, and together they had won. There was no need for grand gestures, no need for triumphant shouts. The victory was etched into the sky, a contrail of defiance against conventional wisdom. This wasn't just about an engine or a plane or a race. This was about the relentless human spirit, the stubborn refusal to accept limitations, the audacious courage to look at established truths and ask, what if? Elias Vance, the lone mechanic, had become a living testament to the power of belief in the face of universal skepticism. He had reminded a complacent world that innovation doesn't always come from corporate boardrooms and multi-million-dollar budgets, but often from dusty hangars and the unwavering conviction of a single, determined individual. His achievement wasn't merely a feat of engineering. It was a philosophical statement, a challenge to anyone who dared to tell another person their dreams were too big, too outlandish, too impossible. He had proven that the true limits were not in the machines, but in the minds of those who built them. This wasn't just a victory for Elias Vance. It was a triumph for every dreamer who had ever been told their vision was too radical, too impossible. It was a potent reminder that true progress often germinates not in the polished labs of corporate giants, but in the solitary dedication of an individual fueled by a stubborn belief in the unseen potential. His Vindicator, a machine once ridiculed as a Frankenstein's monster of aviation, now stood as a silent monument to pure, unadulterated ingenuity. It was a testament to the courage it takes to challenge established norms, to defy the comfortable consensus, and to carve a new path through the very sky itself. The roar of his re-engineered helicopter turbine had not just outclimbed a jet. It had shattered a paradigm, echoing a profound truth that the greatest barriers are often those we construct in our own minds. Elias, still standing by his now legendary engine, felt the cool breeze on his face, a stark contrast to the thin, frigid air he had just commanded. He looked from the Vindicator, its metal still warm with the lingering heat of its impossible feat, to the boundless expanse of the sky above. It was an ocean of blue, now empty of challengers, waiting for new dreams to take flight. A quiet sense of accomplishment settled over him, not the fleeting joy of victory, but the deep, abiding satisfaction of a promise kept, a vision realized against all odds. He hadn't sought fame or fortune, only to prove a point, to demonstrate that the spirit of innovation, when unbound by convention, could achieve wonders. His legacy wouldn't be found in corporate reports or quarterly earnings, but in the quiet inspiration he ignited in countless garages and workshops across the nation, in the minds of those who now dared to question what was truly impossible. The Vindicator had opened a door, not just to higher altitudes, but to entirely new ways of thinking about flight, about power, about what a single person, armed with nothing but conviction and genius, could achieve. So, the next time you look up at the vast, endless sky, remember the lone mechanic and his helicopter engine. Remember the roar that defied gravity, the climb that humbled a titan, and the quiet triumph that proved the only real limit is the one you refuse to challenge. If this story ignited your own spirit of innovation, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of human ingenuity pushing the boundaries of what's possible.